I'm going to introduce someone who is very, very special to Rail Volution, Congressman Earl Blumenauer, who is the founder of Rail Volution. Some of you may not be aware, but Rail Volution actually started in a high school or church as a community-based activity, trying to understand how Portland area could accommodate growth and development and create more livable communities. Earl was elected to the U.S. House of Representatives in 1996. Congressman Blumenauer is Congress's chief spokesperson for Livable Communities. He's been traversing the entire country, more than 200 communities, and he's worked with local governments, citizens, and civic organizations to strengthen local capacity and to help promote this idea of livable communities with transit. He founded the Livable Communities Task Force, the Bicycle Caucus, and several other caucuses at the federal level. He is a co-chair of the Passenger Rail Caucus and the Trails Caucus, and a member of the Open Spaces and Land Trust Caucus. In 1991, he founded Portland's Regional Rail Summit, which I mentioned earlier, which has become Rail Volution. Thank you for being with us, Earl.
Thanks, Dan. It's a pleasure to be here. You know, we had this response in terms of how many are out-of-towners. Well, of course, all the hands raised here from out of town, because everybody from LA is stuck in traffic. You may have noticed this is an election year. Anybody notice that? Well, if you're not in a swing state, you may not be aware. But all the polling, the debates, the ad wars, early voting is starting, lots of churn and excitement. But I will tell you that I think some of the results are already in. And I think it's safe to say that you are winning. I started yesterday in Houston, and it's just amazing what's going on there. They're trying to act like Dallas. Soon to they have 3 rail projects underway, and actually I helped campaign a little bit for a bike and trail initiative that looks like it's going to be successful. $200 million, 150 miles of trail that will catapult it into the front ranks. This afternoon, or yesterday afternoon after arriving, I spent some time with a friend of mine, David Abel, who's sort of my Los Angeles, Southern California livability consultant. It took a while to figure out what new hot spot to have a beer, because the downtown vitality is very, very much in evidence. 100,000 people a week ago in Ciclavilla. And you've had this running experiment with Carmageddon, shutting down the freeway, showing that people can in fact survive and rather successfully without access to the vaunted freeway system. The prior week, I was in Arizona, among other places, having a chance to drive with a fellow who actually got inspiration at a Rail Volution 10 years ago, the new streetcar alignment. It's still a year from opening, but there's $1 billion of activity permitted or in many cases actually underway in Tucson, a project that I was pleased to work on with my dear friend and colleague Gabby Giffords, something that's going to make a profound difference in that community. One of the events I did in Phoenix featured former Mayor Terry Goddard, and we were reminiscing about 22 years ago, the campaign, Valtrans that would have integrated light rail transit into the Valley of the Sun, and how heated the debate was. It ultimately was defeated. But today, they have a light rail line, $6 billion of new development. They've located about 20% of the university at the other end of the line, and people are looking forward. City after city, state after state, people are embracing the principles that so many of you have worked on for so many years. Dan's right. It was 21 years ago that we gathered in a church in Northeast Portland. We hoped to have 100 people. We brought this guy, Calthorpe, into town. And we found it was standing room only. 375 people who were willing to come together to plan with us how to transform a rail line into a system. It grew exponentially over the years. After 3 years, we had over 800 people, 5 states in British Columbia. We decided it was a national conference and treated it that way. And for 17 years, we've been moving around the country, having these conversations, encouraging one another. It's increasingly difficult to know actually where to go because there are so many communities that are on the move with their own development. And then there are opportunities to go back to places like LA, returning, watching how it has taken hold and has been blossoming. Dealing with LA's progress and, as we heard, a very bold vision for the future. That's why we have over 1,150 people registered as of yesterday. It'll probably go over 1,200. We have people from Canada and Germany, 199 cities represented, giving a sense of the breadth and depth of this. But I think it's what's part and parcel to makes this so interesting is the transformation that has taken place in the way that the issue is managed. When we started some of this missionary work in Phoenix or in Salt Lake, it was extraordinarily controversial. Today, it's accepted, it's usually embraced, and it is going far beyond light rail transit. The streetcar has become a vital tool for a growing movement, revitalizing communities large and small. We're going to hear about a little bit of that in Los Angeles with a streetcar. It's in Little Rock. It is helping in over two dozen cities are now either operating streetcar, it's being constructed, or they're actively planning it. This development-oriented transit is shaping the way that people look at mixed-use, business districts, and capturing the imagination of people on the street. Bus rapid transit is around the world and in the United States is coming into its own. But just as important as these transit options, refining bus service, streetcar, light rail, heavy rail, is what's going on outside the window. We're experiencing a bicycle renaissance, not just in strange places like Portland. As I referenced, there's been exciting things happening in Los Angeles, in New York, in Chicago. We now have bike lanes, something I will go to my grave being very proud of. Bike lanes down the middle of Pennsylvania Avenue in Washington, D.C. The last time I biked to the White House, I counted almost 36 people passing me. When I first went to Washington with a bike instead of a car 17 years ago, I wouldn't see that number of cyclists in a month, including the bike messengers. And in Washington, D.C., over 2 million people have used the bike share program. And as near as I can tell, it is the only fully self-supporting mass transit system in the United States. It covers all its operating costs. And my friend Rahm Emanuel has taken the challenge of Mayor Bloomberg. He's going to put thousands in Chicago. We're going to have a bike share in New York next year. I was in Des Moines 10 days ago, and across the street from where I was appearing was a bike share station. This is extraordinarily exciting to me. Additionally, we are watching the pedestrian movement take place across America. A number of you are involved with that. Virtually every trip involves a pedestrian link. And that's dawning, finally, on planners and developers and those of us in local government and federal government. We're slowly coming to the realization, and that is a staggering number of 21% of the accidents here involve pedestrians. Disproportionate injury to pedestrian and cyclists. But we're starting to understand the role that making our roads safe for all users, all transportation modes, is causing us to reshape the way we think about public spaces, the relationship between those travel modes, and the opportunity to create healthier lifestyles. The revitalization that is taking place in downtowns like this, in communities large and small across the country, livable communities, I believe, has become the new normal. In part, this is driven by demographics. Part of what is happening in most communities, when you look at the long term, we're looking at 370 million people by 2050 or more. But the growth is occurring, a minuscule amount is families with children. The driver is single-person households and families without children. By 2040, we will have more the mixture of amenities that so many of you are working on. Young people increasingly, some of us are of a generation where we lined up, we camped out the night before at the DMV when we were turning 16 to be able to get that driver's license the second we were eligible. Now we're watching that rate of driver's license issued to teenagers going down. I've got a 23-year-old at home who still hasn't got a driver's license yet. We are watching that they're interested, this generation that doesn't know what a landline is, who, unlike some of us, have to wait up to watch Jon Stewart. They watch Jon Stewart when they want to, and will instruct some of us on how to do that. They have choices, they want a different lifestyle, and they are your most active customers, except for that other demographic, the cursed baby boomers, who helped drive the auto-dominated phenomenon in the first place, and are now very active in participating in creating this shift. Increasingly, they don't want to be forced to drive. They actually like to walk, shop, socialize, strolling as exercising, as the baby boomer marathon knees give out, and this is part of their healthy lifestyle. Now, these powerful changes at the metropolitan level have been threatened and complicated by two very significant events: the near collapse of the economy and the characteristics, I don't want to just paint this Tea Party only, but the characteristics associated with the near collapse of the political process. Now, as to the economy, this is pretty well known to everybody in this room. We watched housing markets deteriorate, the bubble pop. We still have millions of people with mortgages that are underwater. Investors lost their nerve, if not their shirt, and companies are still trying to regain a balance. There's a painful recovery that was clouded by government insecurity and retrenchment. That you understand, appreciate, and you're coping with. But there was another element, that near collapse of the political process, that is every bit as serious, complicated, and consequential. I think it is an existential challenge for our movement. You may remember the chants a couple years ago when we walked from the office buildings to the Capitol to vote on health care, and we were surrounded by thousands of Tea Party demonstrators chanting that government should keep their hands off their Medicare. Think about it. It was part of an alternative universe. I'm the death panel guy. Okay? End-of-life care that I worked on our Ways and Means Committee on the health bill, because everybody agreed that giving families information about the challenges they face in one of the most critical periods that any of them would ever experience, knowing what their choices were, and having those choices, whatever they might be, respected, protected, and enforced, morphed into death panels. Well, the inability to have a rational conversation in Washington, D.C., and some of you have had experience with this bubbling over in local conversations about planning and zoning, is profound. It's an era where the government mandate for health care started out as a solidly Republican alternative to Hillary Care and co-sponsored by 19 Republican senators, morphed into socialism and a threat to individual liberty, except when it's in Massachusetts. You may have noticed how difficult it is to have a reasonable conversation about climate change and global warming if you're one of those nervous Nellies who believes 99% of the scientists are right, as we watch 3/4 of America in drought and unprecedented climate instability. This inability for us to be able to have thoughtful conversations, whether it's science or it is land use or transportation, energy policy, healthcare, dramatically complicates your working existence. This has become a vehicle for extremely limited government, and in some cases, no government at all. And if a government program or policy is not perfect, it becomes a rationale to do even less. Look at how the discussions surrounding the Recovery Act, the stimulus, is completely hijacked. History will show, and some of you may have read the reviews about Michael Grunwald's fascinating book, The New Deal, where he deconstructs what happened with the Economic Recovery Act, documents the fact that it did actually save or protect 2.5 million jobs, one of the most ambitious technological advances, everything from rail investment, energy, the smart grid, medical technology, things that are going to make a difference for decades to come. And it has been vilified by some of my Republican friends, and my Democratic friends don't want to talk about it. Hello? This is something that we're going to have to figure out how to unwind. it provided the impetus for the worst transportation bill in history last February. And a number of you helped us stop that dead in the tracks. That and the fact that it never had a hearing in committee and had little glitches in it. But it, again, dramatically distorted what we did. We've never before had a partisan transportation bill. We ended up with something, I mean, it was a D+. I voted for it because it was better than the alternative, and because in 100 weeks we start over again. It was only a short-term extension. These are examples of why your engagement at the front lines has never been more critical. We may have lost the stimulus messaging. We may have watched strange things happen on Capitol Hill with infrastructure. But what this means, I think, is an opportunity for you to help us change what that's going to be in the next 100 weeks. The laboratories that we are seeing in metropolitan areas around the country are going to have to drive this agenda. We're going to have to work together to press for equity and results. Your efforts are going to be necessary to make sure that the federal government does not abandon its critical role to provide resources, create a framework that makes everybody play by the same rules, and encourages our better angels. If it hadn't been for the framework and the federal pressure and the resources and the flexibility of Ice-T 20 years ago, we would have only seen a fraction of our progress. We're going to have to work very closely with our state officials, departments of transportation, to make sure that the program for transit, for bikes, fixing it first, for flexibility, for an emphasis on results, not just dropping down concrete where there appears to be a political pinch. It's important that we work together to create and capture value locally. It's axiomatic that had we been able to retain ownership around freeway interchanges and auction it off to the highest bidder rather than the lucky or occasionally the well-connected, we could have financed the entire interstate freeway system with not a dime of gas tax. You're creating value with your visionary programs, policies, and investments. And we need to be more creative about capturing and retaining that value to keep the machine moving forward. We're also going to have to pivot to a new paradigm on funding the highway program at the federal level. Oregon gave you the first dedicated gas tax in 1919 for road construction. We're in the second phase of a pilot project so that we can get rid of it, replace it with a vehicle miles traveled program with higher fuel efficiency, hyper-efficient diesel, hybrids, plug-in hybrids, electric cars. The Highway Trust Fund is in a downward spiral. And this is the decade that we need to pivot for something that is sustainable in the long term. Now, I know people are concerned that the man is going to know where you are. We need your help to show them that anybody with one of these, the man already knows, right? Right? And we're perfectly capable of designing mechanisms that keep track of distance, not locations, to make this change and to add onto it applications that will make our transportation system work better and give more choices to our motorists. We need an all-of-the-above strategy. We need to focus on the power of what works that actually improves traffic flow, that reduces pollution and vulnerability to economic and environmental challenges. You know that the projects that you're involved with create more jobs per $1 million invested, again, than simply dropping down concrete in remote areas of the state or even the suburban areas. And that this is all about not forcing people out of their cars, but giving them more choices so they're not held hostage. Rail Volution has been at the vanguard of this, but it's a changing guard after 2 decades. We're losing some of our pioneers, Mickey Blizzard, Steve Dodder retiring. We've got a new leader in terms of running the operation with Dan. We're asking questions about the organization itself. Can we make this conference better and more relevant, more powerful? And should we be doing things beyond simply the conference? And the Rail Volution team is working with you to find out if that makes sense. Our big tent needs to be further expanded. I can't say enough about what's happened with the philanthropic community. Strategic investments from Rockefeller and others kept us alive and made it possible to change and beat back some really bad initiatives and to keep this process growing around the country. We're going to have to capitalize on this coalition that we've created. It's waiting for our involvement, our leadership, and our example. And if we do our job right, we're going to find we're creating livable communities across the country. But more than that, I truly believe that what you are doing, engaging the public and showing results, stretching value, looking for the future, talking about vision in ways that people can comprehend and feel, is the key to healing the political process. So that you get a government that is at the federal level, state level, that is the partner that you deserve. And ultimately, we will have those livable communities where our families are safer, healthier, and more economically secure. Thank you for helping make that happen.